Hello, Ben and Joyce. I wanted to offer this video that will walk you through the proposal I've put together for you so that I hopefully can provide some more context in terms of what I think the very best solution is for you. So I'm just going to share my screen here and walk you through the PDF that I provided as part of the proposal. So just starting out, I've called this the Daring Leadership Proposal because I think that what your team really needs is more than just dare to lead. If we were to take your team who's healing from the loss of not only your previous facilitator, Rick, but also, some of the conflict that you've been seeing in the team. If we try to take them right into this place where we're asking them to be vulnerable, I think your investment will not gain the results that you're hoping to get. So I will walk you through that, but just wanted to give you that preface. So we know that the world needs braver leaders, and we're all a leader in some way. And this is the basis of the work that the Dare to Lead program brings. What I heard in our discussion together is that you need to restore. So you need to restore and regroup after the loss of not only your coach and colleague, Joyce, but it sounded like Rick was more of a friend, and the team had really trusted his approach and responded well to his approach. So I think we would also need to reestablish trust with the new facilitator, and they need to reestablish trust with one another. When we see conflict, trust gets broken, and we need to give them a basis that they can walk into Dare to Lead with. So I'm suggesting we reconnect to respect, this concept of respect. What does it mean? What does it look like in our actions, words, and behaviors? And also give them tools for providing healthy communication. So healthy conflict, healthy dialogue, so that they can repair by fostering a culture of belonging, and then relearn new ways to lead and engage with one another. So that's what I heard from our conversation. As a result, what I'm suggesting is a little bit of a more robust approach to getting your team to where you want it to be. So as you acknowledged, Rick had done some pre-work that if I were your successful facilitator that you've chosen, would need to go back and also do some of that work so that I can get to know your team and some of the key challenges that you're facing. So I would want to dig into that work engagement survey, get a sense of what are the concerns, what are some of the issues. I would want to also engage with your leadership team one-on-one to hear what their challenges are so that we can tailor a program based on those challenges. Now, here's where a bit of a diversion comes into play, and it is this idea of how do we address the existing conflict that you're seeing. And so what I've done is reach out to a colleague of mine, Christine Masson, who is not only is she a certified coach and a certified DISC facilitator, and I'll explain what that is in a moment if you're not familiar with the tool, but she also trained in the same cohort as Rick in the Dare to Lead training with Brene. She was also from Vancouver as he was, and she knew him. So why I reached out to her is that I think she could offer a really complementary model to your program, but she knows Rick and can honor the essence of him in our approach with your team. The other reason why I engaged Christine is that if you've noticed from my approach, I'm fairly calm and diplomatic, and you mentioned that you need someone strong enough that they can step in and really address conflict if it's happening in real time. And Christine, while she's very kind and highly skilled, she also has this no-nonsense approach about her, and I think she would be a great complement so that we're providing that kind of spectrum of approaches in terms of what resonates most with your specific team members. So I am suggesting that we have them do a DISC assessment, and this is based on conflict styles. So it'll give them insight into their own, and they will have a sense of other styles and how best to enter into dialogue with those other styles. I really think that would set the foundation that your team needs to understand conflict, understand how they're showing up in conflict, and understand what signs in others say about the way that they approach conflict. And it'll give you a little bit more of that restorative healing experience to then be able to eventually step into Dare to Lead. So that would be a 1-day workshop. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So then I would want to remeasure readiness. So let's take some key questions from that engagement survey and do a pulse check to see if the work we do through DISC has a positive impact that we're aiming to get from that. Once we determine we're ready, we can then step into Dare to Lead. So as we talked, we could do 3 groups of 25 in the 3-day session. Now, while the 3-day session is amazing and leaders that I take through the full 3 days walk out of there kind of inspired and ready to use their tools, often we hear that they're falling back to old behaviors and patterns. So I really think in order to get these learnings and tools in their bones, it would be great to offer some integration learning. So just 1.5-hour workshops here and there, you can decide the frequency that do deeper dives into some of the tools that we're learning, the resources that we have access to, and having discussions about where are the tools working, maybe where aren't they working, and continue that learning going on. I then want to remeasure after each of those interventions just to see, get quantifiable evaluation data back from your team, because you don't want to invest in a program like this and not make measured impact. The other thing I'm suggesting is the ability to provide ongoing coaching to your leadership team so that they can get help with some of the challenges or scenarios that they're facing after they take the training. Okay, so let's dig in. Step 1 would be to review that work engagement survey. As mentioned, I'd like to partner with Christine on this. We would divide the work up so that you're not paying double for 2 facilitators, but she would take a chunk, I would take a chunk, a total of 4 hours between the 2 of us. But it would give us a great starting point for understanding concerns, issues, and where do we want to measure and see improvement. The second thing we would do is interview your leadership team to understand their individual strengths, what are some of the challenges that they're facing, and so that we can honor your journey so far. It will give us insight into how to customize our approach to meet the needs of your leadership. So I'm thinking that would be about 30 hours. Christine and I would divide that work up with a bit of prep and summary back to you. 3, I think we need to address that existing conflict. And so we would enlist Christine for her expertise using the DISC assessment and workshops to understand your team dynamics. Again, as mentioned, they get a sense of their individual conflict styles and lean into that self-discovery so that they have a better way, at least a better awareness of how they're showing up and the ability to understand the styles of the others on your team. I will provide you with a sample DISC report that will go to each individual. And then I'm suggesting we do 3 one-day workshops, where again, 25 per workshop, where Christine and I walk them through the DISC methodology and do some exercise around, how's conflict showing up? What's a better way to give them those tools and resources? Again, as mentioned, we'd want to do a pulse check. Are we ready to step into Dare to Lead, or are we still seeing issues that we need to repair first? So that foundation will really give us that necessary gauge of whether your team is ready to step into vulnerability and courage, at which point we can then go into the Dare to Lead program. So the Dare to Lead program, as you know, and you're probably quite familiar with, is the full 3-day, 24-hour curriculum. We're saying 3 groups of 25. It'll include all of our workshop materials, assessments, evaluation, etc. I think you already said that you had purchased some workbooks, so whether or not you can recover that from Brene Brown Education and Research Group, we can provide the workbooks and everything that your team needs as part of that. So then the integrating our learning, as mentioned, would be these individual sessions. You can decide the frequency just to hone in on a specific topic. So keep the learning alive, dive a little bit deeper, have discussions about what's been going on, what's been working, where there's still some challenges. So those would be 4 hours of time from your facilitators to prep, facilitate the 1.5-hour session, and then follow up. Again, as mentioned, I'd want to remeasure after each of those. So how are those learning session and integration sessions landing, and are we continuing to see improvement? And then finally, as mentioned, I'd want to offer your leadership team ongoing coaching. It really depends how many you would want to do. Do you want to leave it ad hoc as needed, or do we want to have those scheduled in advance? So that's something we can talk about together in terms of best approach. So getting now into the Dare to Lead program, as you have probably spoken to Rick extensively about, we know it builds that brave space to do hard work. It's really about leading self first. So there's lots of self-reflection, but it gives each of your team members the tools and language to have tough conversations and practice the four skill sets of courageous leadership. So getting into the four skill sets, which I'm sure you're familiar with because you mentioned you've been reading the book and your team's been reading the book. The first is rumbling with vulnerability. It's about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. We talk about where each of us needs to show up with more courage in our workspace or in our lives, into the concept of the arena, shame, empathy, and self-compassion. Next, we get into living into our values. So we explore our individual values, but also we look at your organizational values and create a charter around what actions, words, and behaviors model those values. So walking out of this session, you will have a team agreement around your specific workplace values and how you're going to give yourself accountability around modeling those in your everyday interactions. We also get into the engaged feedback model, which is a great model for giving feedback, whether it's peer-to-peer, colleague to colleague, or leader to employee. Next, we have Braving Trust, and Braving is an amazing acronym that talks about the elements of trust and what builds trust and what diminishes trust. We'll then do an exercise around trust in teams, similar to that values exercise. This is where we will break down the actions, words, and behaviors for each of those 7 elements of braving so that your team walks away with an agreement about here's what trust looks like for us. An important part of trust is also self-trust. And so I have a uniquely built individual assessment where your employees and your team can self-reflect on how am I showing up for myself and for others in terms of self-trust. And then finally, living big. What boundaries do I need in place to stay in my integrity while extending the most generous interpretation of others' actions? And this one is a great exercise, especially in teams where we see conflict. Finally, we get into learning to rise. So this is all about bouncing back, building resilience, and we dig into the rising strong process. So the reckoning is when we're hooked by emotion. The rumble, what stories am I making up? How do I get into that story and look for the facts? And how do we rumble properly with one another? What are some curiosity enablers we can utilize and rumble tools we can utilize to have that healthy dialogue in your team? And then finally, the revolution is putting those skills into practice and building the grounded confidence you need to step into courage over and over again. So within the Dare to Lead program, you get those pre-work assessments, the full 24 hours of instruction, the videos from Brene, guidance throughout from Christine and I, workbook, tools, resources, and online or in person. We would do in person based on our discussion. So whereas Christine would take the lead on your DISC workshop and I would support her, I would take the lead on the Dare to Lead piece and Christine would support me. So here are some of the assessments that come with the pre-work. We have an armored versus daring leadership assessment. We have a braving trust assessment, which will give us insight into where your team is strong and where maybe there's some concerns in the braving elements. And then we ask a question around the importance of courage building, which tells us, do we have buy-in into this concept of courageous leadership? Here are some possible individual session topics we could do during that integration, those integration learnings. This is just a small sample of many we can do. We can dig deeper into armor. We can go into trust or values. We can do a session specifically on feedback and bring in some supplemental resources like radical candor, crucial conversations. And then we can also look at resilience as a specific topic and, as mentioned, others. So, what do my clients say? Here are just a few testimonials. I know that Dare to Lead is an impactful program and can be transformative as long as our participants have the buy-in and the commitment to leaning into vulnerability. So one team I worked with said their team became stronger because they now had the tools they needed to manage difficult conversations and situations. A specific nonprofit I worked with in Alberta said they had this tricky legal matter that popped up in between our sessions, and they really dug into the Dare to Lead tools to address that matter. And the leader, the executive director, told me she didn't think that they would have been able to manage as effectively if they didn't have those tools. So that was a nice acknowledgement of the work. Another client said it just really gave them the tools to lean into difficult, tough feedback conversations. And there was a specific conversation they had that day. So it was nice to get that feedback that the tools worked. And then I worked with a nonprofit locally here, and one of the leaders there told me that the training changed her life. And so we know that Dare to Lead can be life changing if you have the courage to step into it. So speaking of steps, next steps, I would highly recommend that we arrange a meeting with Christine where you can meet her and ask us any questions about the approach or the proposal. And of course, you have my contact information and you know how to get a hold of me for next steps. So I'm just going to stop sharing and say thank you so much, Ben and Joyce, for the opportunity to learn more about your team, to hear about how you're managing given this loss. And I'm so sorry that you're going through that, and what you're looking for in a partner to move your team forward and heal from both the conflict and the loss that you're experiencing, your grief. I'm here if you have any questions. I look forward to hearing back from you. Bye.